What's up, guys? We are diving straight into this. We got to talk Giannis. No intro, no, this is hot hand theory. You know what it is. This is hot hand theory. But Giannis, we hear via Shams, is ready for a new home. Now, whether that's a new multi-million dollar estate in Milwaukee or a new home in a city like New York, Toronto, or otherwise, that part is unclear. But the implication, at least, is that this Giannis thing has some legs. And for the first time, it feels that way to me. I just never believed Giannis would get traded, Jeff. But the fact is that it seems like he is ready. He won't ask out directly, but whatever indirect way he's putting the message out there, the message has been received. And teams are competing for his services. We are going to talk about at least four of those teams that we think could potentially grab Giannis, the pros and cons for those teams, to some extent what a deal might look like, but really we want to focus on Giannis and his fit on those teams and what he would do to title chances for those teams. They include the New York Knicks, the Toronto Raptors, the Miami Heat, and the San Antonio Spurs. Jeff, I wanted to start with some contextualization of Giannis as a player and what that could look like. But I just want to give you opportunity to jump in before I kind of set that stage, and then we turn to what those various teams could look like. And I really am going to lean on you for that. So any initial thoughts before we get it started?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think this is a really unique and interesting moment in really NBA history, because if you think about what peak Giannis looks like and this fringe MVP candidate we've seen since 2019, 2020, or 2018, 2019, when he won his first MVP, excuse me. He really is in there. There aren't too many rivals in terms of players who have reached his individual heights from an impact perspective. But maybe this could be a bias, or maybe whatever you want to call it, in terms of how non-American players are perceived. But Giannis really gives off the vibe of like he wants to win. He talks about it all the time. And I don't think this is a situation like, say, Kawhi Leonard in when he was having issues with the Spurs in 2017 and 2018, where it's like, all right, this guy wants to end up in LA. Like, he wants to win. I'm not saying Kawhi doesn't want to win, but he wanted to end up in LA. I think if any of these teams, you mentioned Toronto, you mentioned San Antonio, these teams may be perceived as not as big a markets as a New York, a Miami, a Los Angeles. If they can prove to Giannis that they can build a contender around him and they can contend consistently with him, the whole worry about whether he'll extend actually isn't as much a worry as it is maybe with other players. And so to bring it back to where I started, this is a really unique time because this is a chance for non-star markets to get their hands on a guy who, again, is one of the rare commodities in NBA history from a peak impact perspective.
I love that because it does frame how rare of an opportunity this is and potentially could be. And to your point, it's all about building a legitimate title contender for the team, obviously, that he's going to, and also for Giannis to feel that way, to want to kind of stay there. And like I said, I did want to dive into Giannis as a player, because, of course, if you're getting Giannis, like you said, like anyone knows, you're trying to win a title. But you're trying to win a title in the next 1 to 3 years, in my opinion. And who knows how his game will age. I think from the outside standpoint, the intuitive position is that it won't age as well as a guy like Steph Curry or guys whose game is really dependent more on like their skills or finesse skills as opposed to physicality and athleticism. But his fit on whatever team he goes to is going to be critically important for getting the best out of him, the best version of Giannis that you can get over the next 3 seasons at the very least, and his teammates being the best version of themselves. And that is how you maximize title equity. That is what we're talking about here at the end of the day, not by bringing in Giannis Antetokounmpo and then putting him in positions where his team is playing in a way that puts him in a suboptimal ability or style in order to play to his strengths, or that of other key guys on the team. So what does that actually look like for Giannis? First, I want to say, like, I personally think about everything from the standpoint about how players add value to their teams. So obviously there's the cliche of you only have one basketball. And like, unfortunately, it is true. And it is binary. right? So either you have the ball or you don't have the ball. That is very much the case when you're on a basketball court on the offensive end. And yes, possessions are sort of fluid. So it's not like, it's a little bit more of a spectrum than the on-off kind of switch that binary framing necessarily suggests. But Giannis is, as we know, as you mentioned, as anyone who's watching this knows, is an elite initiator. And everyone in the league in that archetype is going to draw more attention and be more effective when they have the ball in their hands than when they don't. They're going to be more impactful in that situation. There's maybe one exception, Jeff, it is. It's Steph Curry, who there are some forms of measurement that suggest that he could draw as much attention when he doesn't have the ball as when he does have the ball, which is why he is one of the most uniquely valuable offensive players in the history of the game. But again, there's no one else like that. Giannis is certainly not like that. His off-ball gravity is nowhere near touching anything relative to what his on-ball gravity is. With the ball and with space, he is clearly, if not one of the most effective players in the entire league at generating efficient offense, given the right environment, the right teammates. This is an all-time great offensive initiator in terms of creating shots at the rim. Over the past decade, he's in a tier alone with Hem, Zion, and SGA. He's the best at finishing at the rim, above and beyond those guys. He's elite at scoring from the post. He's improved his passing a ton, and he consistently, according to B-Ball Index, grades out at the top of the league in playmaking talent. The constraint is, like we talked about, he needs the ball to be that effective. He doesn't roll very much as a screener and roller. He requires space because he gets to the rim at this crazy rate, but he needs it to be harder for opponents to wall off the paint. How is that harder? It means that the consequences of doing so are harsher. How are the consequences harsher? How do you punish paint collapsing with the highest value shot in the game besides good rim attempts, which is wide open and open three-pointer attempts from a good shooter? So this season, I looked at some of the data. Giannis essentially does not play next to a five who doesn't space the court, and he doesn't play much of the five himself. He's played 5 possessions this season, Jeff, next to a non-spacing five. Last season, he played 67 possessions next to a non-spacing five. The previous season, 33 possessions next to a non-spacing five. This is not considering if he didn't play the five. This is just if he's playing next to a five who doesn't space or shoot. So I said 5, 67, 33. The previous season, 100 possessions, and it's arguable because he was next to Serge Ibaka in almost all of those possessions, who just came off a 37% from 3 season. Previous season from that, it was 175 total possessions. But again, that was DeMarcus Cousins that season, I think his last season in the NBA, who shot over 6 threes per 75, which is 93rd percentile in the league for centers that season. So he just couldn't make the shots, but he was shooting those threes. Keep going back, 12 possessions. That's the season the Bucks won a title with Giannis. And then finally in 2020, when Giannis was 25 years old, he played 700 possessions next to a non-shooting five in Robin Lopez. Coincidentally, maybe, that year, Robin Lopez attempted more threes than in the rest of his entire career combined. His entire 15-year career combined, he shot more threes in that single season when he played predominantly next to Giannis in these lineups. I don't think it's a coincidence. You get the point. This is the way that Giannis plays. There are conditions under which he is comfortable. There are conditions under which he thrives. If you're going to contend for a title immediately this season and not have some huge learning curve that you're wasting a season of Giannis, of your 3 to 4 season window, your clear best options are to create or already possess those conditions under which he thrives. And every team that's trying to trade for him needs to consider that. With that context, let's talk about the Raptors. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's almost perfect that you're leading into the Raptors, in my opinion, because you're making this checklist of things Giannis needs, which is really unique, by the way. I totally agree with the points you made, but when you think about superstars in history, especially these guys who command the ball the way they do, for most of them, it's just like you start with them and then building around them is categorically easier because you have them, because they're kind of flexible. And, obviously the gold standard in this generation would be LeBron in terms of like If you have LeBron, he's going to check the boxes you need. You can add any talent around him pretty much because he'll get you those things. He'll check the necessary boxes. And this isn't to say that Giannis isn't like versatile and doesn't have all these skills, but because of his certain limitations, specifically the non-shooting aspect of his game, he requires specific parameters. And so as you were going through those in your head, I was thinking about the Raptors and their current build. And I'm going to be honest, actually, I don't think my perspective on the Raptors is going to be super popular within their fan base. But
sorry, guys. We love you, Toronto. Sorry about this.
Yeah, Toronto's such an awesome city. I hope they'll still have me. But I want you to run with me here for a second because I think actually you and I would agree. I don't know how vehemently you would agree, but I think on some level we'd agree that Barnes and Quickley are their two best players.
We'd agree.
Yeah, those are their two best players. I personally think that there's a pretty decent gap between 1, 2, and the rest of the team. But
75% of Raptors fans would disagree with you, but I agree with you. I'm here with you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I want you to, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, I want you to think about the current construct of the team. And if you watch the Raptors, if you dive into the data and see how the style with which they're playing, who's getting leaned on, who's getting leveraged, one thing kind of keeps coming back to me, and that's that they really want Brandon Ingram to work. Like, they traded for Brandon Ingram. They are doing their best to maximize Ingram, and they are leaning into the strengths of Ingram's game. I actually think that's pretty smart. Like, if you get Brandon Ingram, you might as well try to make him as good as possible. But like, when you look at this impact data, it's important to, like, this stuff matters. It of course is going to affect your impact and your overall value if the team is leaning into your strengths as opposed to just like throwing you out there and being like, okay, you have to play off somebody else. We're not going to try to elevate you based on your skill sets. You just have to try to sink or swim. You know, you have to do your best with it. Of course, that's going to relatively affect your value. Ingram right now is being placed in one of the most ideal scenarios to succeed. The team is running the offense through him. He's in the 92nd percentile in usage. He shoots from the spots he wants to shoot from. Like, they consistently run plays for him. And the adverse effect of that has been that, in our opinion, their two best players, Barnes and Quickley, have sort of been asked to scale down and accrue their impact in other ways. Like, they are the two most scalable players on the roster. So again, I actually think that's pretty smart. But where I'm going with all this is, imagine a world where instead of Barnes and Quickley scaling down and adjusting their roles for Brandon Ingram, who they're pretty arguably better than, they were doing it for an MVP version of Giannis Antetokounmpo running the offense. All of a sudden, that makes a lot more sense. And when you combine that with Sandro Mamukelashvili, who is a stretch center, who can space the floor, I looked at the lineup combinations of Mamu, Ingram, Barnes, Quickley. They're doing fine. They're beating opponents by like almost 5 points per 100 possessions across a decent sample size, not huge, but like 223 minutes or something like that. Take Ingram off the court, 125 minutes. Barnes, Mamu, and Quickley are outscoring opponents by 25 points per 100 possessions. These three guys, and I'm telling you, Raptors fans, these three guys were like born to play together. Like, they are so synergistic and additive next to one another, and they are just begging to have a star like Giannis placed there with them, who can just sort of lead the way on both ends of the court. And all three of these malleable players can mold their games around him. You look at Quickley. Anybody who's watched the Raptors or watched the Knicks before him, whether you like him or you don't like him, knows that he is one of the best off-ball movers in the entire NBA. He's always looking to move around the paint, to bend the floor. He's always looking to set a go screen or create space that way. And don't even get started about how he pushes off of misses. I don't know the updated numbers, XJ. We talk about him all the time, but like, he's in the upper percentile of the league in terms of how often the Raptors run off misses compared to how often they run off misses when he's not there. These are all things that just mold so well with Giannis's game. You look at Barnes, Giannis doesn't like to play center. He doesn't want to bang in the post super frequently. Rim protection. Barnes is putting together one of the best defensive seasons in the entire NBA right now. And he has defensive versatility that is unrivaled almost across the league. Mamu, again, stretch five, good defender, is not going to clog the paint as a center next to Giannis. Like, this is an ideal team construction for Giannis. You put together a reasonable trade package that you think might entice the Bucks. The Raptors are already swimming above their heads right now. Their preseason over-under was 39.5 wins. Darko has them just lapping that projection, making that projection look laughable. They're playing amazing defense. This is a trade that very well could be the thing that just immediately puts them over the hump. And we know that they don't really give a shit about, like, oh no, what if we can't extend them? Like, they're willing to take risks. We saw it with Kawhi. They very well could just say to Giannis, you've lived in a cold city before. We can right now get you into the playoffs, give you a chance to win a championship this season, and let's see if you want to extend after seeing how the fans embrace you.
It's a great argument. And to be honest, I don't have a ton to add. I would love to hear from our audience who is listening, who happens to be Raptors fans or people who watch the Raptors. You know, I know a lot of Knicks fans that watch our show are also keep tabs on the Raptors because RJ and Quickley have gone over there. If you put Quickley, to your point, if you put Quickley, Mamu, Giannis, and Barnes together, it might be the best 4-man grouping in the entire NBA. It's just, to your point, it's so synergistic. You have all the spacing that you need around Giannis. You have all the creation. You have guys who can scale up or down. You have secondary playmakers. You have multiple elite defenders, great on-ball defenders, off-ball defenders. Like, I don't know what that 4-man grouping doesn't have. And so it's tough for me to hear the argument that, you know, Brandon Ingram is untouchable and they're going to move, you know, like RJ and Quickley or something like that for Giannis. Doesn't really make as much sense when you put Ingram and Giannis together in that dynamic.
It's not even really about like whether you think Ingram or Quickley is better. Like, if it were to come down to that, like, I think the data all points in one direction, but let's just say hypothetically all the data is wrong here. The things that Ingram does best wouldn't matter anymore once Giannis is on the team. So it's not even about their vacuum impact. It's about the fit. This is how you open the show. This is why team construction matters so much. The second Giannis comes in, if you're going to maximize him, he is your lead guy. So I said, you know, at the start of my little rant there, Ingram currently is being maximized and catered to in a way that he simply wouldn't be with Giannis on the team. They could interact a little bit and help each other out in certain ways, but in the whole, on the macro, Ingram would take a step back from an impact standpoint in a way that we just know Quickley wouldn't. If anything, Quickley would be even better because he's already proven that he can do what he's doing now in an off-ball secondary role. They would just be doing that more with Giannis.
Yeah, I don't have pushback. Again, I'd love to hear comments and hear people's perspectives. What is your counter argument to Jeff? Lay it out in the comments. We respond to every single comment that we receive on this channel, whether we agree or disagree. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's move to the Miami Heat because this is another team that's getting a lot of traction. We know Pat Riley wants to get a superstar in there. That is what he's about. And we know that Bam Adebayo, Giannis have a relationship. You know, I think they may have the same agent or at least agency. There's a lot going on there where you could imagine the Heat might want to pair Bam and Giannis, kind of similar to what we just talked about. I might think about going in a different direction personally, but really curious about your thoughts on the Miami Heat and Giannis.
Yeah, to me, this really just comes down to a different player, and that's Kel'El Ware. I'm sure Heat fans are just sick of this. Like, this season was supposed to be so fun. They bring in Noah LaRoche. LaRoche infuses this new offensive system that's been kind of up and down on the whole. But it's inarguably fun to watch your team play a faster pace, and they've got some young guys who are interesting. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, our head coach just for whatever reason doesn't seem to like this, our most recent draft pick that we're really excited about. The thing is that whether it's Giannis or it's not Giannis, if Spoelstra has decided that, like, as long as Bam Adebayo is on the team, or maybe even if Bam Adebayo isn't on the team, he just doesn't like Kel'El Ware, you have to trade him. Like, you can't. We've seen too many examples of guys just having their confidence nuked and being jerked around the way Ware is being in Miami right now, and then see their trade value and just their overall value tank. And this would just be a waste of an asset who is still viewed as super high potential around the league. So, of course, if it's for Giannis and the Bucks are looking for a young player that potentially has a high ceiling that they could sell to their fans in the post Giannis years, and they are okay with Ware being that guy, and you already know that your head coach isn't the biggest fan of him, doesn't want to play him with Bam Adebayo, even though they both have shown shooting flashes, gets mad when Ware shoots too many threes in a game that Ware goes 6 of 7 from three in. Like, there clearly is something here with Spoelstra and Kel'El Ware where he has a bias against him for whatever reason. I don't know what that is. I'm not in his head, but I don't know how much more evidence you need that he's not the biggest fan of the guy. So if that's the case, and you can parlay that and some draft picks into Giannis Antetokounmpo, I don't even know. It's not, I agree with you, XJ, that it's not like the Raptors situation or one of the teams we're about to talk about where the fit is just a slam dunk. It's not a slam dunk fit. But clearly the fit with your best young player isn't good either. So I don't know. Give me the MVP and work out the fit stuff later.
It's a great point, and I think that is the argument for the Heat going for him. And to be very clear with our audience, this is not a show where we're going to really talk about, like, it'll be Ware and Hero and X, Y, and Z. Like we're not going to be clear on what those machinations might look like. I'm going to always err on the side of, to acquire a superstar at the level of a Giannis, you're going to give up a lot. I don't think some of the deals that you see floated around are like, what if we give up Ware in a first and matching sets? Like, no, that's not going to be sufficient. But I will say this. From a theoretical standpoint, we talked about, a foursome. If you talk about this not being a slam dunk fit, if I were to think about from a theoretical standpoint, the pairing of Tyler Hero, Norman Powell, Kel'El Ware, and Giannis, it's not as good as the four Raptors that we talked about, but it's up there just in terms of you have the shooting, you have the offense, you have the off and on ball, abilities in terms of, guys like Hero and Powell being elite shooters, to go around Giannis, and then Ware working on his 3-point shot, which I think he's going to be a really, really, really good shooter at some point. And then you have the defense. It just works. That's not going to happen. The Heat are not going to trade Bam Adebayo for Giannis. So from that standpoint, to your point, from a practical standpoint, seeing how Spoelstra has treated and seemingly felt about Ware, he'd be the one going out. I imagine in that situation, though, probably Tyler Hero would be going out too. But if the Heat were able to keep him or they weren't able to keep him, you're pairing Giannis and Bam, and you're basically going with something that Spoelstra basically got an opportunity to workshop in the Olympics, which is the AD and Bam pairing, and saying like, hey, we're going to switch everything. We have these crazy switchable bigs and we can do all this stuff defensively. I think it's cool. It's not the most exciting situation for me, for Giannis personally.
The thing I really like about Bam and Giannis together is, even, as they're both getting a little older, which is weird to say because Giannis is 31 and Bam isn't even 30 yet. They're both awesome defensively, but they're different enough that there's really, really high synergy defensively. I think that they are both switchable, but I like Bam's switchability more than Giannis's. I think Giannis's superpower defensively is his weak side rim protection. So you put Bam in a position where he just becomes fully switchable. He's switching 1 to 5, which we know he can do. And you have Giannis as the roamer in that Draymond Green role. And then you have Erik Spoelstra, who I've seen Heat fans say some wild stuff about him recently, just growing frustrated with him. He still is one of the best coaches in the NBA, especially with tactics. You let him build a defense around those two guys, and we're talking about almost independent of anybody else on the roster, a floor of, top 5, top 10 defense in the NBA. That's a pretty damn good starting point. And I know that neither one of us, we're both, big sample size guys. We're not just going to jump at any opportunity to believe it. But Bam very clearly is working on the shooting aspect of it. Whether you buy it or you don't buy it, he clearly is trying to reach his ceiling. So whatever ceiling is there, I do believe he's going to reach it. Whether that ceiling is good enough to be a true stretch 5 next to Giannis, I'm not sure. I'm not claiming that's a yes or no. But I do feel strongly that he's trying to reach it, which is a good thing if they were to get Giannis.
I totally agree. I love what Bam is doing. And I love that he's shooting the threes. He's like, I'm going to get these threes up. A lot of guys shy away from it. We've seen AD do that for a long time, where it's like the coach wants him to shoot threes. And he's like, man, I just don't feel comfortable doing this. Bam is putting a lot of effort into increasing his volume significantly from last season. And even though he had a really, really poor stretch for a lot of the season, he's shot his way through it, and he seems to have turned the corner and getting back to it. And I think that's going to be part of a progression for anybody who's learning to incorporate a new part of their game, especially shooting from deeper range than they're used to throughout their entire career. And somebody with the touch of a Bam Adebayo, who seemingly makes every short mid-range jumper that he ever attempts, he should be able to kind of get there, you would imagine. So I wouldn't say I'm a doubter in Bam's ability to kind of become a good enough shooter to be able to work with Giannis. And the defense, to your point, I mean, you make great points. I think people think of Giannis as like this perimeter kind of stopper guy, and that is not who he is at all. There's been situations where, an offensive player is going off and it's like, why don't they sick Giannis on him? And it's like, probably because Giannis would get cooked too in that situation. Like, that is not his best strength defensively, stopping guys on the perimeter. But to your point, he has a different strength than Bam, which makes them synergistic defensively as well. So I definitely think it could work. My point is, I just don't think it's like the most exciting situation of this list. And that allows us to turn to the New York Knicks, who we talked about specifically about Giannis a few weeks ago. And spoiler alert, at least for me, things have changed since then. And so we may have a different perspective on the situation moving forward. I'm curious what yours is.
Yeah. The inevitability has gone away. Things have changed significantly. I'm going to say, I'm trying very hard not to say like crazy stuff, because that has scarred me for life in terms of just like, the analysis felt like such a sure thing. And it's just not. I was just dead. I'm going to contextualize it.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Basically, what I said a few weeks ago is that the Knicks were in a place where they were almost a boring team to analyze, because they were experimenting with their lineups and their strategies. And it just felt like the team was trying everything. And so there was no point in even talking about them, because like they would inevitably try the thing that we were talking about. And I use that word inevitable. Like, yeah, this is inevitable. They're going to try it. They're in a great spot. And a couple weeks later, it's just almost clear that the opposite is happening, that they've like made up their mind. They are content to do certain things and to not do certain things, like play Towns at the center surrounded by 4 shooters. And at this point, if that is the case, I'm not going to reuse the word inevitable, but if that is the case, they simply have to trade Towns. And that's hilarious to say, because anytime we've covered the Knicks in the last year and a half since they traded for Towns, we've talked about how high their ceiling is with him. I'm doubtful you'll find 2 people who are as high on the theoretical upside of a maximized Towns as XJ and I. I just don't think that's going to happen in New York. It's pretty crystal clear to me that it's not going to happen in New York. Mitchell Robinson returned 4 games ago against the he returned earlier than that, but Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson started playing full time together against Dallas 4 games ago. In that time, XJ, they have played less than 10 non-garbage time minutes with 5 shooters. I looked that up. They're just not doing it anymore.
Wait, less than 10 minutes?
Minutes.
That's insane.
And if you're not going to do it, you're not going to get the best out of Towns. We've said it repeatedly since October of 2024. If you're going to have Karl-Anthony Towns, if you're going to trade Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle, I'll go a step further. If you are never going to play Towns with 4 shooters, the Knicks got railroaded in that trade. Just absolutely demolished. People talk about it on Twitter all the time, but they're not saying it for the right reasons. They're just like, oh, Dante's really good and Randall's really good. We knew those players were really good. That's not the point. It's not like the Knicks were like, yeah, we're getting rid of 2 crappy players. DiVincenzo and Randle are both really good. Yeah, we know. The reason that the Knicks were going to potentially win this trade is because they were going to take a Karl-Anthony Towns who's playing next to Rudy Gobert and turn him into the Karl-Anthony Towns at center with maximum space and create an all-time great offense. They just have no interest in doing it. Instead, they're saying, well, what if we had the Timberwolves offense with Towns and Rudy Gobert, except we didn't have one of the greatest defensive players of all time? No. That's we don't need any of that. Yeah. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I have no idea why the Knicks fired Tom Thibodeau. I don't get it. If you were not going to do things differently than Tom Thibodeau, why would you disrupt the paradigm like that? I thought the whole point of firing Tom Thibodeau was because you wanted to raise the ceiling and try other things. But apparently the Knicks were just waiting for Mitchell Robinson to get healthy so that Mitchell Robinson and Josh Hart, XJ, have only shared the court for under 50% of Mitchell Robinson's minutes in those 4 games since they both were back. So that means they're playing all the minutes. One of them is on the court, and they're not even maximizing them together because those 2 together are great. It's not like you have to shoot to be great. That's not our perspective. But if you're going to have one of them out there, you might as well have the other one because you're not maximizing the space. But no, the Knicks are just going to keep playing these 4+1s. And at this point, I don't even care if it's for Giannis. They just have to trade Towns before his value is just completely cratered.
All-time rant. I don't know how this is going to come out on camera, on audio, because I don't know how clapping sounds. All-time rant. In fact,
he's standing up.
Dude, I don't really have much to say. I don't know why they fired Tom Thibodeau if this is the direction they were going to go in as it relates to Giannis specifically. There's theoretical, and we just talked about this with Erik Spoelstra. There's theoretical upside, what things could look like, the maximum optimized version of these players and these teams if they were deployed in a particular way. And then there's just the practical aspect of like the way that they're going to be deployed and the way that they're going to be leveraged. And if we're bound to these limitations of the way that coaches are currently coaching their teams and what their preferences are, personality differences, dispositional differences, if we're bound by those, realities, which we are, then yeah, you gotta include Towns in a deal. Unfortunately, that means you're probably doing Towns, like Towns, Bridges, and Deuce, and then whatever picks you have. And if you can get back Drew Holiday and Giannis, that's kind of the direction that you're going in. Because from the theoretical side, which I love to talk about, but unfortunately it doesn't seem realistic, I do think there's a great case for trading both of your wings, OG and Mikal Bridges, and holding on to Towns. Because you're talking about either running out a starting lineup of something like Brunson, Hart, OG, Giannis, and Mitch if you traded Towns and Bridges for them for Giannis. Now, that's a weird lineup for Giannis. I just made the case that he basically, since he's been elite, has never played very many minutes or possessions with a non-shooting 5. And now you're putting him next to a guy who is literally going to shoot 0.03s per game and 0 threes on the season. Maybe you just say, Giannis, play this entirely new style and just get rebounds, and we're going to play this way. I think theoretically that could work. I don't know how comfortable Giannis would be in that situation or if that's getting the best out of him. I don't think it is. And the other case, if you're trading both wings, which I know Knicks fans will not want to do, they want to trade Mikal Bridges. They do not want to trade OG Anunoby. I get that. But if you do make that deal and you do somehow still get back Drew Holiday and Giannis, now you're talking about something like Giannis, Drew, Hart, Brunson, and Towns. That's a 5-man lineup, and even if we are gonna, it would lead to really annoying conversations from Hot Hand Theory about how Shamet should be starting over Hart to maximize both lineups again, and that'd be unfortunate. But even if you just look at Brunson, Drew, Giannis, and Towns, speaking of best foursomes in the league, that's going to be up there with them. So, it's unfortunate, but I don't think that route is realistic because of these issues with deployment, with personality clashes for the Knicks in terms of Towns and coaching and interpersonally from the player standpoint. So yeah, it seems like if the Knicks get Giannis, it will be Towns, it will be probably Bridges. And to be honest, I don't think it's likely, but does it make the Knicks a better team? Even though it's a weird fit? And even though you're basically you are banking your hopes for a title on Mitchell Robinson staying healthy. Yeah, I think it's probably still better because they're not going to maximize this team, to your point.
Yeah, the ship has sailed. I can't. Oh man, I'm usually so much less susceptible to stuff like this. But they had played a reasonable stretch of basketball, some games with Mitchell Robinson healthy, where it was like, oh, we're going to try this lineup and we're going to try that lineup, and just completely gone away from it, just completely. And that's not only disappointing for, as an analyst or, for Knicks fans, but it also just, to me, it's nonsensical because I don't know why you wouldn't be interested in attempting to maximize the roster that you do have rather than trying to, jam a square peg into a round hole and hope that they become something that they've proven that they're not. And the other thing is that I do think one issue is that the Knicks are really good. Like, that doesn't sound like an issue, but talent alone is going to win them a lot of games because even the floor version of some of these quote unquote suboptimal lineup constructions are still really good lineups that are better than a lot of the teams across the league. But you don't win championships with your floor version of yourself. You win a championship by fully maximizing and leveraging the skill sets of the guys on your team. Look no further than the Indiana Pacers last year, who did maximize every player on their team, who got Pascal Siakam, who both XJ and I said was a bad fit with the Pacers, made a mistake, should have waited for OG Anunoby so that Halliburton was just fully surrounded by shooting and defense. Nope. Got Siakam to buy in, got the best version of Siakam that we've ever seen, and put him next to Miles Turner, got the best out of Obi Toppin, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, go down the roster. They got the best out of every single player. That's how you win the conference. And this is so telling because the Knicks still took them to 6 games. The Knicks took them to 6 games with the suboptimal version of themselves. That's how close they are to truly contending for a championship. It's just, it still could happen, but you're not maximizing your chances of it happening. And that's the problem. The Knicks probably have a better chance of maximizing their roster if they just trade for Giannis at this point.
Yeah, I agree, unfortunately. And it's better to have a maximized suboptimal roster than to have a non-maximized theoretically optimal roster. So, and if that's the case, that's direction makes sense. And we'll see. I think the Knicks have a good shot at acquiring him because that's clearly where he wants to go. And if they're willing to make a big offer, which I think will unfortunately include Deuce McBride in there, along with the salary in Towns and then, some value in Bridges plus assets, they might be able to get it done. The last team we're going to talk about is the San Antonio Spurs. And if you're a Spurs fan and you're here to listen to this now, I think that you'll find this particularly interesting because Jeff and I have a relatively similar view on this. Jeff, do you want to talk about the fit and the potential for Giannis on the Spurs?
Well, the potential for Giannis on the Spurs is you're putting two of the 5 best players in the NBA together, and they fit perfectly together. But where you're going with that, I still have not seen anybody else talk about this, which is wild to me. Maybe we just create High Hand Theory Spurs spinoff channel so that we can talk about this, because this is a perspective that is not prevalent in the sphere at all. And it's not like I don't see any criticism of this one player, any of these players who we're about to talk about, but it's almost like they view them independent of one another, like they're not connected. De'Aaron Fox, Dylan Harper, let's forget Harper for a second. When the Spurs traded for Fox, and it was looking like that their season was going to go the way it went, and then they got the number 2 pick, and all the mock drafts said that Harper was going number 2. They already had Castle on the roster, who they were high on, Rookie of the Year. They had Fox incoming. And while Fox and Castle were kind of a murky fit because they both like to have the ball in their hands, they're still different enough that they could work. We've seen them play well together. We've seen them play together. Adding a guard who the theoretical upside version of him is him also having the ball in his hands, who probably can't play next to 2 other guards who want to have the ball in their hands, that just from day one. And by the way, we have the receipts. So if people are like, oh, you're just saying this now, because no, we said this before the NBA draft. You're never going to be able to play these 3 guys together. They're not going to. They haven't in their career so far. And if they can't share the court together, how can all 3 of them be the best versions of themselves at the same time, especially if you're trying to prioritize a guy who has maybe the highest ceiling of any NBA player we've ever seen before? Like, Wemby is priority 1. So they're already behind the 8 ball. It's not like Castle, Fox, and Harper are priorities 1 through 3. It's 2 through 4 at best. I'm saying this now in hindsight. I definitely was not saying this then, so no snarkiness here. It would have been easier if they got Knepel instead of Harper, because Con could fit with Castle and Fox, and you could have a lineup of Fox, Castle, Knepel, and Wemby that could work, and they could all build together. But that's Monday Morning Quarterback. Everybody said Harper was the slam dunk number 2. I have to trust them. I don't do enough NBA draft research to say that was a mistake. So if you knew that you had to draft Harper, as an NBA franchise, it was your responsibility to have the foresight to realize that this problem was going to occur. We're now 8 months after the draft, and it's still not too late. The word is still not out. The Spurs still have leverage. All 3 of these guys are still super highly regarded around the league. But if you're the Spurs and you're trying to win as many championships as you can with this singular all-time great prospect in Wemby, it has to happen before everyone else figures it out, not after. It can't be, well, we tried, but we didn't really try because they didn't play together. I guess it's not going to work. And then any team that tries to trade for Castle or Harper or Fox has all the leverage, because it's like, dude, we know you want to give them up. We're not gonna empty the truck for these guys that you're trying to offload them. So if you can get Giannis while giving up one of these players, I think for the Spurs, you almost have to, because they're already sort of in title contention. I mean, we've seen them, they've beaten the Thunder 3 times. They're a really good team at their best. If they're healthy this year, they're going to be a problem in the playoffs. Add Giannis to that picture, and they're one of the title favorites immediately.
For me, you have to do this. And this is for me. And so let's be really clear. The frame that I'm coming from is trying to maximize your opportunity to win a title. Basically, every season that you have an elite player in the NBA, you have an elite player in the NBA. One of the handful of the best players in the NBA. And then you have a chance to put another one of the handful of the best players in the NBA. And, like you said, they just happen to work perfectly together on offense, and they just happen to work perfectly together on defense, and there's no weaknesses there when you have these 2 players. you just have to do it. And I'd love to hear from Spurs fans, because I know Spurs fans have talked about wanting to see, like, let's just chill, let's just see these guys grow together. We want to see the kind of the come up, and these guys all be in their early 20s and get better and better together and evolve. And to me, I'm like, this is not, Wembanyama puts you on a different timeline. We talked about this earlier in the season. Wembanyama is 22, yes, and he's not in his prime, but he's in somebody's prime, because what we're seeing from Wembanyama is the prime of what we would see from 99% of the league, if not more. It's better than the prime of 99% of players who have ever played in the NBA already at 22. And so what that means is, typically you see guys early in their career and you're like, they're not ready to do this in the playoffs. They're not ready to win a title right now. And that's probably because they're not the best version of who they're going to be yet. And so maybe it's a little bit early. Maybe they need to be even better. Wembanyama does not need to be better. He is right now one of the best players in the league. And by the end of the season, like, the way that he evolves and gets better and does all kinds of things, he could be the best player in the NBA already. Given that, you have to do this if you have the opportunity to. You're really not losing anything by way of like rotation players, because the deal would probably be something like Harper, Sohan, Keldon Johnson, Barnes, and all the firsts or whatever. Like, yeah, losing Barnes or whatever would really hurt, but you're really not losing that much with respect to your depth in terms of guys who are going to play and fit with these guys. I know Spurs fans would disagree. You can get on me in the comments. It's fine, but you got to do it to me. You got to do it to me. You immediately become, if not title favorite, in the top. You're in the OKC tier. You're in the OKC tier. I don't think it's even like you're a level down. You're in the top tier. So if you have that opportunity, you have Wembanyama in a rookie contract. I just don't see a world where you don't do this deal.
Might as well just get this out. Everyone's going to hate us after this episode anyways, because the thing about trade conversations is nobody likes these conversations because they love their teams. And that's so cool to see, actually.
Yeah, like, that's true.
The passion they have for their teams and the loyalty. They just want to build with the guys they already have. It's really cool. Castle. Castle is one of those players, actually, that makes me check my own eye test like all the time, because it's almost like he's a constant reminder of like, I just need to not, like, Castle is one of the coolest players in the league to watch. He's so he just does things once a game where you're just like, nobody else can do that, right? Like, he's like some of those drives he has to the rim where he just hangs in the air and does all sorts of crazy shit. Like, he's awesome. And he's a good player already, even as young as he is. Like, he's just a good, helpful player. I think his ceiling, especially defensively, is ludicrously high. There's a game, actually, December 27th against the Jazz, when the Spurs lost at home. And Will Hardy, who I think is a really, really good coach, played some of the most exploitative ghost coverage I've ever seen a guy do on a player. He said to Castle, we do not care that you're out there. we are going to, you can get whatever you want, whatever points you want to get, whatever shots you want to take. If they go in, okay. Just, we're going to make it harder on these other four guys anytime you're on the court. I think Castle was minus 33 in that game, which is crazy for when you're on the Spurs and you're playing the Jazz at home. They just got absolutely annihilated in that game. Since that game, actually, Castle's net swing is over negative 10 points per 100. The Spurs are like minus 2 per 100 when Castle plays, plus 8.5 per 100 when Castle doesn't play. Now, short-term on-off, not a huge deal. There's tons of noise. I'm not saying this means Castle's like an all-time negative or anything like that. Not what I'm saying at all. Again, I think Castle's a good player. Where stuff like this does matter with the ghost coverage is at the highest level in these playoff series, when you are being specifically scouted against and teams are going to try to exploit your weaknesses and attack them. Now, I think that this upcoming season, playoffs, assuming health, teams are going to look at this stretch and specifically that Jazz game. And when they're trying to figure out how to guard and how to stop this chameleon unique freak in Wemby, who is like impossible to stop, that is going to be where they start. Now, Castle has individual counters and ways he can grow long term. Of course, he could just improve as a shooter. That's step one. It's a little bit easier said than done. But there are other things you can do. Again, you don't have to be an elite shooter to be a very good player in this league. And I think Castle has enough other tools to be very good. But my point is that if you think there's an outcome where maybe Castle's just not going to improve as a shooter, you're with him every day, you see him at practice, just for whatever reason, the shooting evolution isn't there. This could be, when you combine that with the fit between Fox and Harper, this could very well be his highest perceived value ever in his career. Could be. I'm not saying it will be. I'm saying it could be. And these are things, as a franchise, you just have to factor in when you're building towards the future. You can't just be like, oh, well, everything's going to stay the same and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. No, you have to have foresight and you have to anticipate these things. And I think that that's something that is, again, not getting talked about at all. And I think the Spurs, they should have been considering it on draft night last year. They definitely have to be considering it as we approach what could very well be one of the most monumental trade deadlines in years. This has to be on their horizon or on their monitor.
Yeah, all of that is totally fair. It makes sense, and I know Spurs fans are going to be upset about this, but I will say for Castle, I am very impressed by his ability to get to the rim. I think it's like that skill set of getting to the rim is such an incredibly valuable skill set that it makes it really tough. And of course, he's a very good defender. It makes it really tough to give up on a guy like that, or it's not really giving up on him. If you're trading him for Giannis,
yeah, I was not saying do not put those words in my mouth. I was not saying give up on Castle.
I'm not saying that you're suggesting give up on him, but what I mean by give up on him is I mean like I could imagine a world where, let's say, if Harper is the main guy in the deal, Castle, you retain Castle, you have Castle in a more right-sized role for him. Like he is in there when Giannis is not in there, and he is the guy kind of driving the offense forward, and he is getting to the rim at will and putting pressure on the defense. And then you go, whew, Castle's out the game, man. Who do they got coming in? Giannis is coming in to put additional pressure on the defense and get all the way to the rim. Like that's a really tough duo to deal with, and to just deal with the consistent pressure, attack. Big, strong, physical, athletic wings just attacking you in the entire game relentlessly, I think could have a really strong and damaging effect on opponents to the point where you get in the fourth quarters and they have nothing left for you. So I could see a way where that could work. And for me, for that reason, the guy I would include would be Harper, and I would keep Castle if I could choose one or the other. But I would part ways with either, and I would part ways with both if I had to.
Yeah, my point wasn't that it should be Castle who has to go. So I guess I should clarify that. My point was that, one, I would have considered the shooting aspect and the fit on draft night, whenever the last draft was in June or whatever. And two, I would start with Harper, of course, and say, hey, Dylan, he's the number 2 pick a year ago, and we can't give him the minutes that he's going to deserve. Like that would be the way I'd frame the conversation with Milwaukee. But if Milwaukee's like, yeah, we don't see it with Harper, we haven't seen enough, we couldn't possibly give Giannis up for him in picks, we like Castle more, that I think that's where you say
and enjoy Milwaukee,
right? Exactly. that's where you have to just sort of be like, okay, like that's not enough. Like you have to be aware of how unlikely it is that Harper and Castle, 2 guys you took in the top 4, you utilized very valuable assets to get these guys. You have to, when you do that, the goal has to be to have them hit their ceilings and be the best versions of themselves. So you have to be aware that when you have both players on a team that already has De'Aaron Fox and Wemby, of just how unlikely it is that they both hit their ceilings. That's such an unlikely thing to occur.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. Those are the 4 teams that we really wanted to talk about. Obviously, there's other places Giannis could go. He could go to the Golden State Warriors. He could go to there could be a sleeper team that comes out of nowhere. He could just stay in Milwaukee, and that's most likely what's probably going to happen. But I think it's very interesting just from a team building standpoint. team dynamic standpoint to kind of hit on all the different angles that we spoke about. And if you're here at this point, first of all, you got to subscribe because you listened to an hour of this conversation that has got very technical and analytical. And that means you must enjoy it to some extent, or you're just hate watching, which we appreciate that too. And you can subscribe and hate watch continuously. So you got to subscribe. And then secondly, we would love to hear your opinions and perspectives on the different things that we talked about here. Where do you think we're wrong? Where do you think we're kind of erring on the side of maybe synergy and fit versus just pure dominance with respect to, you know, ability and skill and superstardom in the league? Would love to hear all of your thoughts on that. But until next time, appreciate you all joining us. For Jeff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.